We talked about the learning styles as well, so people individually will be a little bit different from each other. Some people learn more through hearing, other people they're audible learners, some people learn through visual stuff, so learn through seeing, and they have a greater proportion of their information that they take in from that type of learning, or other people learn more from doing. As a generalization across the whole population, people in general will retain 10% of what you say, 30% of what they see, and 90% of what you do. So, Tomo, can you give me a quick explanation of the activity that we did, the first slide that we first came in, the first thing we sat down?
Yeah, this is what we will do for today.
Not the slide, as in the first activity that we did, but I'd asked you guys to write down. What did we do?
There's many things you could think about on baseball.
Yep. And then what did we do?
We then tally them up.
Yeah.
Categorise them.
Yeah, sure. Jeremy, what are our topics for tonight? What are we going to go through tonight, Jeremy?
We're going to go through, obviously, a recap of everything we've done in previous week. So, the LTAD model, coaching philosophies, then we're moving on to spending 30 minutes on working on the new hitting philosophy and pitching/throwing philosophies.
All right, fantastic. That was great. Didn't demonstrate what I was trying to get out of you, but what I was trying to say was usually Tomo would be able to remember that first activity that we come in and did here. The fact that Jeremy could actually remember what we just spoke about in slide number, whatever it was, 3 or 4 slides ago, I wouldn't expect that most of you guys would actually remember what we were going to cover for the course of this lecture.
I sit in a room doing this 60 hours a week.
You're obviously, like I said, it's a very advanced group. I'm okay with that. Perfect. All right, well that's great. You're obviously someone who is better able to retain more information from just audible stuff, and the fact that I've got it on the board as well means you see it as well, so that's fantastic. Didn't necessarily prove my point, but...
Well, hang on, but we actually did the activity as well.
Yeah.
So I guess that would, they'll be checking off that box as well, I suppose. We actually physically went through that as well, so that might...
All right, well this is really important that you guys understand this, because when we talk about instructions and all that, and I know Watto touched on it last week, but this will come up all the time. So if you keep this information in mind, when we're delivering sessions, what proportion of our time do we want to have people listening to your instructions?
Less than 10%.
Less than 10%. What proportion of their time should they be watching other people? Yeah, well, basically any time they're not doing something themselves, what proportion of time should they be doing something? As much as possible. All right, so in our sessions, and I'll be harping on this as I go around, just making sure that there's lots of activity. You know, and the one, some of you guys may have seen that little clip that I had of Matty Corbett doing the one-hand drill last night. My only criticism of Matty for that introduction of the one-hand drill was it was too long. So we're talking about one-hand drill. What it should be is basically about a minute, maybe a minute 30 tops to go through the same stuff that he talked about. All the information was perfect. He describes it really well. Matty and I have worked together for a long time. He's been hearing me banging on about that stuff for a long time and regurgitates it pretty good. But because his memory is so good, because he retains information so well, he remembers all the stuff that I used to do 10 years ago when, to be honest, I probably had a lot of mistakes that I probably would do better these days. And he remembers all of that stuff and regurgitates it word for word. Right? And it's great information. I love the fact that he presents it really well. But for the sake of that drill, it went for about 3 minutes 40. To me, that was too long. That was probably about 2.5 minutes worth of hitting that they didn't get because he was still talking about it. All right, quick explanation, give them a demonstration, and then go to work. Let them go. Make sense? All right, we'll get into this a little bit. Can somebody give me a definition or compare intrinsic versus extrinsic learning? Does anyone know? Does everyone got their handouts? Have a bit of a rummage through your handouts and let's see if we can find it. It's from the Level 4 Accreditation Manual. There is a nice little definition of it. And I just want to make sure you guys are aware of this. It's just at the bottom of the page. It's also now on the board.
So the top will have understand, accept material, skill acquisition.
All right, so this is in the level 4 accreditation material. And this is part of the stuff that obviously we want you guys to know and understand. This is important. All right. Intrinsic versus extrinsic learning. Not all skill and knowledge is a result of verbal instruction. All right, so extrinsic learning, this is when the learner is aware of, so we're specifically standing up in front and teaching you something. That's pretty straightforward. Something is being deliberately taught, example through instruction, explanation, and breaking skill into parts. Whereas intrinsic learning occurs without the learner being aware of it. Can somebody give me some examples? Obviously there's one on the board. Are there any others that you can think of?
So you give them a result thereafter. So for hitting, in particular, if you're giving them a target to hit at, they're just got to do something for intrinsic.
Yeah, what are they learning intrinsically?
Control the body, to be able to get the bat head.
Yeah, the swing, in terms of, if you give them a hitting approach and your approach is to have them hit the target, the intrinsic learning that they feel is the movement of the swing, that kinesthetic awareness of their swing. Right? That's what they're learning intrinsically. They don't realise they're doing it, but that's what they're learning. Right? That's one example. Yep. Anything else?
A lot of the games activities are intrinsic. You know,
Yeah.
a bunch of under 8 T-ballers roll a ball
Yeah.
down the centre and, you know, got to hit it with a,
Yep.
for a ball. And
Perfect. That's the perfect example. That's, again, a bunch of kids just out there playing a game. You've specifically constructed the session with a games-based approach to give them a whole variety of movement skills. They're learning intrinsically. They're learning movement-based skills. They're not even conscious that they're doing it. All right? They're just learning those movements. There is some evidence that skills learned extrinsically are less permanent and are more likely to break down under pressure. Intrinsic learning may be the best way as the conscious mind is not interfering. So how could the conscious mind interfere in a learning situation? Exactly. All right, so that's the perfect example of that. So if you're specifically talking about, again, that hitter that we were talking about before, whose intention was to hit a line drive to centre field, if he's thinking about where his elbows are going, what his hips are doing, all that sort of stuff, it can actually distract him from the actual goal or intent of the task or the outcome that is required, i.e. hitting a line drive to centre field, because he's so conscious of trying to perfect that movement. He actually loses some of his ability in terms of the his subconscious is his conscious mind is interfering with his ability to execute that task. When you consider that in order to develop skilled execution, a player must develop a kinesthetic feel for the skill eventually. All right. So again, the hitter doesn't need to know that his elbows go here and this does that and that does that and blah blah blah. It's way too complicated. All they need to know is the feeling of a good swing. All right, they don't need to know the intricacies of each different part of that. They just need to know what that feeling is. All right, and that's where if we can find ways to develop things and have them learn intrinsically rather than extrinsically, then that stuff tends to be more stable, more enduring. All right, so if you have a feeling for the good swing that you develop through your T drill and your flip drill before you get into the game, sometimes you can take that into a game. But if you're thinking about where your elbow's going and this and that, and you have to do that to be successful, once you get into a game situation, now they're throwing a live ball at you, what do you think's going to happen? Yeah, your conscious mind goes to seeing and hitting the baseball. You go back to exactly the same habits that you've done until you get 10,000 repetitions to iron out your muscle memory and all that stuff. It won't change. All right, does that make sense?